What if I told you the way it has always been done is not the best way? Facing your fears will change your life. The passion behind this journey is merging two separate worlds into one with the goal of creating value and awareness for a better life.
I'd rather be sidelined trying to achieve greatness than watch greatness achieved and it only set on the sideline. Now introducing your host, Jacob Emery.
This episode is brought to you by R&R Pipeline, an infrastructure company. Our purpose? Enhancing America's infrastructure with a safety-driven, integrity-led culture that provides an environment for team members to grow and thrive. Welcome to another edition of the Iron Infrastructure Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm in the presence of greatness, absolute greatness. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. And you two fellas have probably had a lot of bad judgment that led to a lot of experience and now have nothing but profound, great judgment. Jim Havens, Steve Layman, thank you guys for coming on the show. You guys have both been in Staple in Licking County with everything and anything development, real estate, net worth building. I'm honored to have you guys on the show, and I appreciate both of your mentorship and friendship. So
thanks for having us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What has been the most profound experience in the 40-some years of business that you guys have been in? Can you think of one individual experience or one thing that was so paradigm-shattering it sticks out above the rest?
No.
If you're looking for like a motivating event, it would be, if you asked me over my lifetime, I would say understanding the powerlessness that I felt as a kid when my dad died. And so I would say that is the seminal event that formed the basis of me wanting to be entrepreneurial and to have control of my and a vision of my future. And so I've always started out being self-employed from the very beginning because of that very reason. And so that was always sort of just a drive. That underlies it.
Which makes perfect sense of why you're so driven, so analytical, so factual with what you need to be in certain areas. And there's turning points, I think, in everyone's journey where you have like a defining moment. I always try to name them. Isn't this fun? The moment that I reference frequently from you with this seemingly unbearable moment for me. But I realized after you said that, after I got past the point of wanting to kick your ass, I realized that I will never be in this situation again, no matter what, in the rest of my life, because I will be a different person. The situation will be different. But this is the first time that I ever faced all the chips being in. And to me, to you, it was probably nothing. To me, it was like potential catastrophic, like setback. And having the confidence and conviction that it's going to work out, it normally will.
Yeah, I mean, so, you collect those experiences. I mean, Steve, if he thought about it, collecting experiences. I mean, we've talked together about business deals that we've been involved in. I think the ones that have gone well, you don't learn that much from, but the ones that you've struggled with and had a hard time with, you've learned a lot from them. Right. It's like we had a saying in trial work: if you win a case, you don't lose any. You don't learn anything, but if you lose a case, you learn 100 things. So.
Yeah, you asked for a paradigm shifting thing, and I'm going to struggle to come up with that. But I have lots of experiences. My first real estate investment was back in 1980, probably 1980. I bought a junk house, $10,000 on Mount Vernon Road, in bad shape. A friend sold it to me. I didn't have any money. So I went to my broker at the time, a guy by the name of David Klauder, and told him I had this deal, but I didn't have any money. And he was willing to co-sign for me. So we went to Park National Bank and borrowed $10,000. And, on the surface, it was a good investment. There was two units, and each one was rented for, I don't know, $200 a month. So it's enough to pay the mortgage and pay the taxes. But it was a terrible house. I mean, foundation was bad. The plumbing was bad. Had rats. One of the tenants who was in there a long time died. So then I couldn't rent it. So I moved into it, which was compounding a bad decision. There's 2 points to the story, both of which are probably equally important. The first is, in real estate investing, the most important thing is to survive your first experience. I could have easily had said, I don't want to do this. This is crazy. It's too much work. I don't like waking up in the middle of the night with rats in the kitchen. I whined, and the guy I bought it from bought it back. So I got out of that. But the other lesson I learned was that David Klauder, who had a significantly higher net worth than I had, which wasn't easy, it wasn't hard at the time, was willing to co-sign for me. I could have bought not anything, but I could have bought something pretty nice because he was willing to co-sign. Mm-hmm. And the lesson I took away from that was don't waste your resources. That was a true, his confidence in me, that his willingness to co-sign with me on a real estate investment was very valuable. It was an asset, and I threw it away by buying something that had no value. Mm-hmm. So I've tried to stay away. One of the lessons I learned was don't waste your resources. And they come in all sizes and shapes. And when an opportunity presents, take it.
That is taking that risk or facing that uncertainty with opportunity. The reason I met Jim was because of doing that. Yeah. At a speaking engagement, Adam Lewin was the key speaker, and it's for the Big Brothers Big Sisters. And my father-in-law works for him, and I told Cody when we got done, I'm not leaving until I shake his hand. I talked to him because I knew his history. I looked him up and did some research. I didn't know why, but the opportunity was there. The opportunity that was presented before we got there went away. So we had the opportunity to meet someone that was very high up in the customer we were working for, and then he never showed up. And I was sitting there for just a split second thinking, man, this was a waste of time. The outcome was better than I could have ever imagined. But for a moment I had some doubt, and then I just had to recircle back around and think, okay, how can I create opportunity out of what should already been there, but now is somewhat adversity? And Adam Lewin gets up to speak. I bug him 45 minutes after everyone else is pretty much gone. And I grab onto his arm and I grab onto his hand, and I'm very persistent and maybe slightly too persistent, but I was not leaving until I had that information. I did not realize that a half hour sit down at his time and one connection to Jim Havens would forever change my life. So I really think that's a very powerful lesson, to not waste any opportunity. And if you think you don't have to be a great one, because a lot of the good ones or the great ones, we don't even know how great they are until after. Right. Just if you have that conviction or that stomach feeling that you should do it, I say do it.
It's your willingness to do something that you're not sure of. You're overcoming your natural inclination to doubt yourself or whatever. It's like how, when I met Steve, he was introduced to me through Granville Township, and we were in the process of trying to figure out, we had a list of properties that we were wanting to buy. I was new to the community. Eric Jones, who's a very interesting man, he had been the paper boy in the village of Granville growing up. He's like a 6th or 7th or 8th generation Jones that had grown up in that world, and he was the manager of Park National Bank in downtown Granville at the time. And one of his hobbies, was to collect resumes of people and understand what they would do. And he loved to connect people together in situations. It just was fascinating to see who he could connect people together so that they could get things accomplished. He introduced us to Steve, and that was sort of the beginning. And I was kind of thought myself, well, not quite sure why would we have Steve help us, and kind of just sort of second guessing it. But he also gave me a great piece of advice. He said to me, now you're from Columbus and you're going to be filled with all these ideas, but do yourself a favor, just shut up for 1 year and don't say a word. Just listen and figure out how things work here. That was good advice. And so that was on that list. And Steve was one of those suggestions. And so we began to interact, and it was fascinating to have Steve help us put into contract properties that we were trying to acquire in the open space world. So, it's just, I'm thinking of it, well, I can read a map and I can see who the owner is. And I was, the component that I lacked was, no, these people are not going to want to talk to you. They want to interact with somebody who's
The emotional side of that.
exactly right.
We've talked about, was it feelings versus emotions, I think? And that was such an interesting take when you presented that to me, how the difference between the two. And it was, I think I called you on a weekend randomly and told you what my insight was on it afterward. And that was a couple of years ago. It just made me think of that. But very data driven. Jim, you are. Steve, I'm sure you're pretty data driven as well. There has to be, though, data can take you so far, logic can take you so far, but then you have to understand the emotional regulation of the room you're in or the town you're in. And sometimes I think as entrepreneurs, we overlook that a lot because we're all driven. The facts are what they are, but we don't always know what the person next to us had going on that day or what their life looks like or where their mental state is at. And I would say that we probably have a much different mindset than most. And knowing that we are different is part of the first phase to me of recognition, self-awareness. And it's interesting because I have found more recently, especially, I am a lot different and it's okay. And it's also okay that others around me in a given setting are not like me. That's also completely okay.
Yeah, I would say another thing that you do here is that there's a certain isolation with people that may think like that. And so that comes with it. But to your point about lack of self-awareness, I don't have an antenna for a lot of that. I really don't. So what I try to do is I try to surround myself with people who do.
Yeah. But that is self-awareness though to you. I mean, you clearly understand your strengths and your weaknesses.
I bring along people in situations like where I'm going to go into a room and I don't know the people there. I will often look for somebody who is the one that can poke me in the ribs and remind me of that.
Yeah.
And then I had a great partner, Steve knows him, Dr. Alex Wan, when we built the Newark Medical Center and the office space adjacent to it. And Alex was he was a Filipino Catholic, but grew up in a different culture, very different culture, a very paternalistic culture. And by that, I mean, it's just everything sort of descended familially. And we talked about tribalism versus non-tribalism. But Alex he used to say to me, Jim, you are unable to hear what people are not saying. He used to say that to me. You are unable to hear what people are not saying when you walk into a room. And I thought, well, at first it's counterintuitive. You're like, if they're not saying it, how do I not understand it?
Yeah.
Well, what he was saying is that it's what you were saying. We don't have an antenna. A lot of times that our vision about what we want to get done and stuff sort of like blinds us to sort of like the everyday, in the moment lives that are about the people around us.
Communication is an art. So is listening. It's a skill. I am actively, daily pursuing better listening skills. Listening to understand and hear, not listening to respond.
Yeah.
There's a big difference.
Hard.
It is very hard. And I am one that my Clifton Strength Finder, my number one is input. So input and then competition are 1 and 2. So I like to have input and I like to receive input. And when I figured out that that's great in its own regard, but it can also be detrimental if someone else is trying to express or talk to me about something very important to them, it's easy for me to shut it off. And I had to simplify my own communication ability with people close to me that I have this issue with. I can't read between the line. I can only read the line.
Yeah.
If it's not the line that you're saying, I'm not reading in between them. So I have to have transparency, because what you say should match how you feel and what you mean. And there's a lot of situations that's not the case. Steve, you're very good with communication. You're very, very good at listening and interpreting. How long did it take you to be able to do that? And have you spent time actively doing that, or was that ever an issue with you being a great listener?
Well, I've been told that I'm a good listener. I don't know that I practice it as well all the time as I should, or as I could. I find myself listening to respond. Not all the time, but more times than I should, that I want to. I think that I can read a room fairly well. I think I can hear what's not said. I think it's just one of those things that I grew up being able to do. I don't take any credit for it. It's just it's part of my package of the skills or the characteristics that come with Steve.
Would you say that your dad's occupation and you being able to observe him played into any of that?
It could. My father was a general manager of the Union League Club in Philadelphia, which is a pretty big job. It was organized a long time ago, during the Civil War. At the time it was a men's club. It's now a people club. It's not just men's club. But it was sort of the power in Philadelphia would have been members of it. And he could work a room better than anybody I know. He would listen to, talk to, shake hands with, introduce himself to everybody in the room, and then be able to remember who we talked to and what was said. I mean, that's a real skill. My sister picked it up better than I did, but I picked up a little bit of it. She picked up a lot of it. It's learned. I think it's. I don't know.
So you had a model for it.
I had a model. Yeah, I go back to what we talked about earlier of confidence, and part of my confidence has come from the mentors that I've had. I think one of the things that has helped me is the willingness to learn from everybody. So I call people mentors that they might look at me and go, I wasn't your mentor. And I'd say, well, actually you were. So
being coachable. So many entrepreneurs fall and die on their pride.
Yeah.
Being coachable, I don't know if it's something that you can learn over time or if it's just the willingness to be vulnerable and get better. I know a lot of people that are extremely coachable that are going to have very fulfilled, successful lives. I also know some entrepreneurs that are so pride driven and know better than everyone else that they're so focused on that, how good they are, how great they are, that they don't want to be coached or are not even willing to. And I've seen people that I used to be close to that imploded doing that. I'm the man. I know better than everyone else. And the reality is, I don't think when we figure out that we really don't know anything in life in general, no matter how far advanced we are in our career path, we're still actively learning. And for me, the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know, because there's so many little things that I'll learn and realize that step one of 10,000 is what I just realized. I didn't even know that existed a year ago, but now I do. And now I feel like there's so much less that I know now in comparison to what I did before. It's unlocking another door and opening it up. Learning is doing something different in a very similar situation. And it's kind of like the bad experience or the bad judgment creates experience. Learning can be hard. It's hard to sometimes look at us doing similar things over and over and over and not adjusting. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you guys use as far as tracking, analytical, or just awareness that you have that you can say, okay, I know that I've done this before. This situation has happened before. What did it happen? What happened last time to get me here? And what am I doing the same? And what can I do to change?
We may have had this conversation before, but I am always astonished when I see somebody that makes one mistake and doesn't repeat it, that they've learned from it and they don't do it again. I'm surprised when somebody can do something twice and not do it again. My goal is not to make the same mistake 4 times. It's incredible to me the people that, well, let me give you an example in the real estate world. Buying large tracts of land with debt.
Yeah.
It's a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
I've done it 3 times. It's been brutal every time. I'm trying not to do it a 4th time, but it's a challenge because part of me wants to do it, but I'm learning.
So part of what you say, Jake, is that we talk about making mistakes. So something that people who are in business or entrepreneurial, making a mistake usually means losing money. And so if you want to be successful, you will make decisions so that you don't lose money. And so you can't afford really to stay in business and make too many of those type of errors and not sort of have some self-awareness about that. I would say also something you had talked about earlier about learning and working in situations where you're not a rugged individualist, like you were talking about. Some people want to just be this rugged individualist. Well, in order to achieve scale when you're young, as a real estate person, you have to partner. I mean, Steve talked about his need to find a co-signer. In order for you to achieve scale, in order for you to buy larger things, you have to partner with other people that have, you can pool your capital together. And so you learn that partnering and the personalities, you learn to navigate the nuances of those personalities because you need their capital. And so partnering is not really a science in that sense, it's more of an art. And so you're measuring sort of the goal of being able to pool capital and work together in deals that tend to work together. And then you're sort of figuring that out. And at the same time, you have the benefit of a positive deal so that people are sharing in the reward of that. And so Steve's developed a very good process with good capital partners, and that's what you do over time.
It's amazing. First of all, I just got to put this on the record. You two have accomplished greatness in your own respects and regards and are very, very humble. And I just want to say thank you to both of you for being mentors of mine. But you guys are very humble for what you've accomplished. And so you should be proud of yourself. Both of you should be.
Well, Steve, don't you think, though, that you're always sort of like thinking you're doubting yourself too anyway? So it's kind of like in my mind, it's kind of like I just sort of like, I sort of just sort of think, well, Wonder what more I could get done.
Think what I could have done if I'd tried.
Yeah. Then what more? Yeah.
We talked about that last time, Jake. The fear of success, and the governor.
So self-sabotage, is something that I've seen a lot. I've done it myself sometimes, and I seen a quote the other day, and I can't remember who said it, but self-sabotage happens because you get to a place that you already know. Yeah. So when you sabotage, you already know what that disappointment, that setback's like.
Yeah.
But to break through that is something new.
Fear of scale.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a partner who told me that it's interesting to watch. When people are growing a business, some of them just sort of hit a natural ceiling point where they just don't progress past it, and they may self-sabotage in fear of trying to gain scale. And it is a hard thing to really understand, is at what point does scale scare you that you don't want to get bigger? I mean, where is it just too uncomfortable? And it's no metric for it.
Yeah, it's like the psychology of money. Right, that book is very.
It is. It's a cycle. It's a weird psychological thing. So it's like, what point does this scale of this become unimaginable to me, and I just can't navigate it?
Is it a ceiling of complexity sometimes, or is it the ceiling of risk, comfort?
It is more that. Yeah, that's a more accurate way of saying it. No, that's true.
Because I think when the complexity sets in, it's because we're at a point where we don't know how to get past this certain state.
No, that's true.
But so many people were probably fearful at that point to risk it all and lose it, or whatever the thing that sparked them to want to go to that place in the beginning. So a broken home or a bad upbringing, they overcome it and they get to a certain point, and that risk of being in that state again is there.
Yeah.
And it's probably greater than it had ever been. So it's the fear of going back to that humble beginning, maybe.
Yeah, interesting.
We have always had the philosophy that we could out-earn our mistakes. When I talk about buying big pieces of land with debt, not to say it's a terrible mistake, and Jim says that mistakes are when you lose money. We didn't lose money on any of those. Now, we didn't make a lot of money, and it caused inordinate stress and probably caused us to miss some other opportunities because we're tied up there. But we didn't lose money. So in that regard, it was, it was okay as an investment. Just the stress wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And so just for clarity, when you're buying a large tract of land, it's not producing income.
It's not producing income.
It's an abnormal situation in most real estate situations.
And there's a monthly payment associated with it.
Right. That's why I meant, so it's losing money is probably the wrong phraseology, but you're having to take money out of your pocket to carry
it. That's right.
To carry that asset on the belief that its future value will repay you for your upfront out of pocket.
And then some.
And then some.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things we always talk about scale. If we can out-earn our mistakes, that implies a certain scale. Right. That we're not going to do a $20 million deal because I can't out-earn. If it goes bad, I can't out-earn that mistake. It's going to bring me down. But if we're doing $1 million deal and something goes wrong and you lose $100,000, I can out earn that over time.
So the risk tolerance is at a comfort point.
So people say we take a lot of risk, and I would say, well, it's qualified risk.
Measured risk.
I would use measured, qualified. We understand what it is, and we can out earn it. So is that risk?
What would the cost of inaction be on it?
Yeah.
And so the lost opportunity, if you didn't take action on it, what would that be? And everything has risk. Getting a safe corporate job and working at a big firm, doing anything for somebody else is a huge risk to me. If I'm going to risk everything, I'm going to risk anything, I'm going to risk it knowing that I have the ability to control the outcome the best I can. Where if you work for someone else, You can't always determine that outcome. You cannot always do things to push through it when it's hard. And risk to me, though, is laying on my deathbed and having regret about not taking it. So when I think of risk, the harder it is sometimes, probably the more likely I'm going to do it, because I just think about how epic of the story it's going to be after I accomplish what I set out to do. And risk has to be calculated to some extent, though. You can't just go completely based off emotion with no true direction. And I really think that if you don't know where you're going, any road's going to get you there. So you got to be able to think bigger than what's just right in front of me. And you got to have, whether it be a 10-year or like Jim Collins calls it a BHAG, you got to have a direction in life you're going to assess that risk and make sure it fits that direction to me. So if I think 10 years down the road, is what I'm doing today going to make that a likelihood to happen or not? And I called it priority awareness, and it's been one of my themes of the year. If I'm not doing something to get the top 3 priorities for this year accomplished, if it doesn't fit in that box, it's probably not worth doing right now. There has to be awareness of what you take on. And I know we've both talked about this at length. I was someone that drastically overcommitted in my past and way outdid. My commitment level was higher than my capacity. And so I've had to scale that back. But I understand it now. And it's like that shiny new toy, that red car, that thing that comes right in front of you that seems too good to be true. You got to make sure that it fits in the top 3 things or the top priorities to me. Because if you don't focus on them top 3 and you don't accomplish them, it's pretty clear why. There's a guarantee that if you don't focus on them, you won't accomplish them at all. But to me, it's just making sure that it can change, but you got to have direction in life, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pulls, technology with so many different pulls in different directions. Your attention's always being diverted. It's just at an accelerating pace. That becomes harder and harder to do. I think also picking a way of measuring, when you say your priorities, picking a measurement to reinforce that you are making progress toward that helps with that. And I know Steve now has but continued to look at net worth as probably a priority as far as where he's going to spend time and resources when he looks to that. I think his charitable goals might also be part of that too. When you talk about your motivations,
Trying to monetize my net worth, because for a long time, a lot of my net worth's been tied up in land, which is okay, but it doesn't generate any revenue.
yeah.
So,
And that's such an interesting thing with the real estate, too.
so let's go back and talk about risk for a minute. You talk about measured risk. I was asked to get involved in an oil and gas well twice. And it wasn't a lot of money, but I put the money in. To me, that was really risky. And it's not something I would do now. A, because I don't understand it. And B, I don't have any control over the outcome. So things that I understand, and I understand a lot about real estate. And the deals that we're in, we have some sense of control. So I don't look at those things as risky at all. The risk is, I can quantify what the risk. If it goes south, this is a bad outcome. But that's not really risk. That's just the opportunity cost. But doing something that I don't know. Our young sons tried to get us into Bitcoin forever. And I'm sure people have made tons of money in Bitcoin. I don't know anything about it. I don't want to take the time to learn about it. I don't trust it. So I'm not going there. To me, it's too risky. And my young son's making money. But that's okay. He likes it. He understands it. different for everybody. So what's risky for you or risky for Jim might not be risky for me, and vice versa.
That Psychology of Money, I mean, it talks about, that book in particular talks about,
Morgan Housel.
yeah, great book. Talk about just the ability to tolerate the risk. Is it going to keep you up at night? Is it going to make you lose sleep? Are you going to psychologically implode because of this risk that you're taking? And then you think about the outside perspective. I truly believe that inner confidence and belief comes when you just don't care about others' opinions. And when you would not ask advice from someone, then you're not going to care about their opinion. And I think that's where, for me, I really started to dive deep into who I am at that point and realize that all these opinions that have held me back to some extent, majority of my life, are absolutely useless, because I do not, A, desire the life that this person has, and B, they don't want the things that I want. And that's completely okay. But I'm in the damn arena, and I'm always going to be in the arena. And the man in the arena don't care about the critics, because there's always going to be a critic. There's always going to be someone in the stand throwing rocks at the person in the arena. And for me, it's cost me a lot of relationships. But when I realized that for my dream to become a reality and me live out my dream, everyone else's dream that isn't the same as mine has to die for mine to live. And so the ones that may care or love me the most have this dream for me in their own regard, but it can't be sought through, because if it is, mine won't be. And if their dream is a lot smaller than mine, it doesn't say much about me as much as it does them. And so I cannot focus on the outside world's perspective of where I am driven to go. It doesn't mean I'm better. It just means I'm different, and I'm just living life on my terms. And I think that's okay.
No, yes, sure it is. I mean, you think of your childhood and friends that you outgrow just because your interests are different. You'll find people, as you establish goals and you have those dreams and priorities, that people will naturally align with you, and there will be the others that naturally don't. If that's where your energy and your goal is, that will happen pretty much
Organically.
on its own. And I would say this about some of the people who quote hold you back. I think some of it is in a desire, in a childlike way. They want to keep you safe.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, your failure to take some risks, if you are unwilling to make investments, you've actually handicapped your future to the point that you are unable to sort of weather your years of time when you can't work. So you really, by playing it safe, have really created the worst risk.
Yeah.
You know, because you've lost your health, you've lost your ability to make income, and you've lost your time, and you haven't mitigated. You haven't been able to mitigate those things, and you know we're living much longer, right? So you're outliving your useful work life. So unless you're willing to take some risk and invest and create some future savings, that's a risk.
I think it's the biggest risk.
It is. But it's not taught. It's not taught.
It's caught, not taught.
It's not taught.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, people are not given the tools to evaluate the consequences of those things.
Fear in itself is made up. It's created.
Yeah.
So is faith. So believing in something that you can't see, knowing with confidence that it will work out, having faith that it will work out, is also the same for fear. Fear is created in our minds. It's ultimately, what are you seeing the outcome being? And it's faith driven as a success, or it's fear driven as a risk or failure. And when taking on something that's perceived to be big, I just think of fear from a visual component. Like you're standing on the top of this ledge over this body of water, and it's a foot down below you, and fear just looks like it's 100 foot deep, and it's miles long, like you're in the middle of the ocean. The longer you wait, the deeper it gets, the longer it gets. Yeah. But if it's something that you desire to do and overcome, you just take one step. Oftentimes you figure out it's not nearly that long because I was up a foot higher and now I can see much better. But it's also only 3 inches deep. And although I may get wet, beat up, trip, fall, I'm not going to drown. It's only 3 inches deep. I'll be okay. But that first step is sometimes the hardest. And on a journey to 1,000 miles, it's always that first step that starts it.
No, and it's, if you think about modern humans being around for 200,000 years, you think about what created fear in our ancestors. And I mean, those were real things, but our brains and bodies are hardwired to that. And so now these little things that you rightly say are, quote, made up, there's not some animal chasing us, trying to eat us or whatever. Right. I mean, there are these things but they are perceived inside of your mind as equally fearful for those things. But we're sort of living in a modern world filled with all of this data and messages that constantly are bombarding us. But we still have that 200,000-year-old wiring that's reacting to all of it too. So it's very hard to regulate that. It's hard.
Yeah. It is. See, what do you think about that?
Well, I think we're all different. We're all rare and unique individuals. And some people are more fear-driven and some people are more faith-driven. And it'd be hard to say when you become, let's say those are the two options, fear-driven, faith-driven. It's hard to say when did I become faith-driven? Because I don't remember not being. Have I been scared? Yeah, I've been frightened before, but I don't believe that I've ever been driven by fear. I don't have anything. I have a disadvantage to you because I don't have that part, that what happened to you, it didn't happen to me. I'm not driven by what happened to you. It drives you. I don't have that. So we're different and we process stuff very differently. And I'm fascinated by it. I told you this before. Hard-headed, driven people, I'm just in awe of because that's not me. I don't feel that. So you talked about having to lose some relationships. At some point in your life, you don't have a choice. You're stuck with your family. You're stuck with the people you're with in school. But at some point, after you get out of school, this becomes a choice who you hang out with and the influence that you let into your life. And it's a pretty important choice. It may be one of the most important choices we make is whose friendship do we solicit? Whose mentorship, what relationship do we solicit, do we choose? And I think that has as great an impact on us as anything as the pool we choose to swim in. Because it's a choice, I think, at some point. Not when you're young, but at some point you get out of adolescence, you're a young adult, who you hang out with is really important.
The lonely road. So I'm sure you guys have both experienced this at some point in your life, but I created a framework, Jim. I call it the Iron Built Blueprint. 3 stages. You have a breakdown, a bridge, and a build-up. The breakdown is assessing your true reality with fact. Yeah. So list out all your issues and pain points in life. Everything that's setting you back, that's not getting you to the place you want to go. And then working out all the ones that you cannot control the outcome. So the economy is bad, the interest rates are high, anything of that nature you cannot control it. So you mark it out. Take top 3 to 5 of the ones you can't control the outcome. I'm overweight. My relationships are not good. Whatever it may be, and focus on them 3, starting with the biggest priority for the best part of your life. But what often happens, to Steve's point about the people you're around, your environment really dictates your growth. So if you have a non-growth environment, you're probably not going to grow. If I'm at the bar with a bunch of drunks, I'm probably going to become a drunk. But if I'm hanging around people that are worried about net worth and worried about growth acceleration and doing bigger things, I'm probably going to be doing that similar thing. And there's a point where we're young. We don't like the pain anymore of our current reality. And the pain of change is less than the pain of the current reality. And so that's where the bridge comes in. So you break down that reality and then you build a bridge away from it. And that means changing your environment, changing your habits, changing what you consume mentally and physically. So the content you consume, the media, what are you focused on? Are you watching a reality TV series on Netflix, or are you doing personal development at night? Because I can promise you one's going to get you where you want to go and one's not. So changing the little habits day by day and then doing them consistently, that's where the bridge comes in. But then the bridge oftentimes leads us on this lonely road where we're out searching for our true being, our true self, and no one's there because the friends that we used to hang out with, we've outgrown, but we haven't got to the place to establish that new base of friends. And when you land the bridge on the other side, you're done building that bridge, that lonely road. Mine was probably a couple years. You get the bridge to the other side, then where are you going? Because then you just want to get away from the pain. You weren't focused on where you wanted to actually go as much. But then you get away from that bad place and into a better place. And that lonely road kind of ends, but then you got to start the build up, the last phase of it, which is the highway to success. So what do you want your life to look like? And you got to solidify your direction in life. But it's hard to see through the woods when it's foggy and the trees are all full. So it's more about taking a couple steps in that direction until you figure it out. But the growth that you have during that time is not recognized by the people oftentimes that were around you at one point. So I, through high school, was a degenerate that got in a lot of trouble, and I barely survived high school. I was a goofball that didn't take anything serious. And that happened for 2 years outside of there too. And then my lonely road started at 20 years old and everything turned upside down. The people that I knew at 22 were much more sophisticated and professional. But I still knew a lot of the same people at 22. They just didn't know me anymore. Because the ones that I had known the best previously didn't know who I became. And so when recognizing growth, physical accomplishment is tangible, but internal growth oftentimes isn't. The ones closest to you sometimes don't recognize your own greatness, your own internal growth. And whenever you realize that, it's heartbreaking to some extent when that old crowd, you kind of leave and they don't recognize it. But then I think you really start figuring out that power follows the blame finger. It's on you. If you want something in life, you just got to go get it. And it's in no one else's control but yours to go after the things you desire to have. The friendships, the relationships, the net worth, anything. It's on us. And life is kind of like a mirror. It's not like a window. So many people search for outside validation and outside answers and outside perspective and all these things outside, but don't ever do the work that's facing them right in the mirror. And I know both of you guys have experienced phenomenons throughout your career and growth like no other. But really focusing on that internal self and figuring out who you are is really hard to do. But when you do it and overcome it, the ones that are closest to you, from my experience, they often don't recognize it nearly as much. And it's the people like in my circle now, like a Jim Havens or a Steve Layman, that I talk to occasionally, but you guys probably recognize more than most. For like in my case, Jim had said things to me, Steve, that have happened almost according to plan, where he's seen something to me I couldn't see. But when he seen it and spoke about it, it never left my mind. It stayed back there. And whenever something would come up, I'm like, that's Mitch was right. He knew exactly what was going to happen because you seen something I didn't see. Have you guys had any experience with this where you've grown so much internally and then it becomes kind of dormant with the people around you that you did care about a lot at one point?
Well, it's a process. I'm going to fall back to it's always a process. I didn't perceive my evolution as a lonely road because, well, maybe I left some people behind. There are other people there who had their hand out. You know, you talked about earlier being on the ladder and you had a hand up and a hand down. I've been fortunate always to encounter people who have their hand down, pulling me up. And then you focus on those relationships, and the others just drift away. They just do. So probably my most formative experience on this, and also, you know, I don't know that I need proof of God, but it's also I fall back as my proof of God is a guy I went to school with, went to college with. Spent a summer at our house, good friend, fraternity brother. Went through a time of his life where he was extremely hard to live with, and we were roommates. And I had the not very nice habit of baiting him, of getting him to argue, and then when he'd get his blood pressure up and get boiling mad, I'd just stop, and I'd stop arguing. And, you know, he's like a fish out of water. He's flailing, and I'm just, what are you so mad about, you know? But he's mad because I made him mad. I baited him and got him going, pushed his buttons. Anyway, this relationship consumed probably a year of my life where all I was just trying to do is figure out this relationship. And another friend was in town who was at Mound Builders Guidance Center, so he knew things about how the mind worked, and we would have lunch together once a week, and we end up talking about this guy. That's all we did. We wasted an hour of our friendship talking about this other guy. And so one beautiful spring day, walking up in the woods up behind Denison, and I sat down on a rock and said, Lord, you've promised never to give me a burden I can't carry. I can't carry this one. I surrender this to you. And it was unlike anything that had ever happened before or since. I've had a physical sensation of a weight being lifted. And I was a different person after that experience. My relationship with him changed immediately. Now, his relationship with me didn't change because he didn't trust me. Because I'm the guy that's baiting him and making him mad and you know, causing a bad toxic relationship. So I'm not sure that he ever got over. I mean, our relationship was never the same since, but it changed for me. I just let it go. I surrendered it. I was able to move past the toxic relationship. I don't know. Where am I going? Tell me where I'm going.
Well, so you can see Steve's life's been very collaborative. You know, you just see it. He's been lucky. You know, the people around him had capabilities and could mentor him. I think you and I grew up in situations where the people who raised us and were around us were very limited. And we were not exposed at a very young age. And so we had these internal struggles. We had these goals, and we really didn't have guideposts for taking us there. But you have this. So you start figuring out for yourself and developing processes. So you've talked about several of them, and these are self-developed processes. So you've learned, okay, if I'm going to make it to the next stage, I'm going to put together a plan for myself, and I'm going to commit myself to habits to allow me to stick to that plan. And then I'm going to determine the result of that based upon my experience in the world. And it's not going to be a guided situation. It's going to be self-guided. And so I'm going to experience that, and then I'm going to adjust to it. And a lot of people who built entrepreneurial processes have gone through a similar thing. And so then they take that self-learning process and they turn it into a universal process for someone. And then they can then use that universal process. That sort of becomes their entrepreneurial unique ability. So I'd say that's been more my experience of it.
A lot of what's caught in life, not taught in life, at least my experience, Jim. I'm assuming you the same.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much with you, Steve.
I had a saying, I would be around a lot of people. So I'm kind of figuring it out for myself all the time. You know, my dad's gone. I'm 5 years old. My mother's a German immigrant and barely speaks English. So I'm figuring it out for myself kind of all the time.
You got a lonely road at a very, very early age.
I didn't
probably.
realize it was that.
Yeah.
I was on my own, and I didn't mind it. It was not. I don't attribute any negativity to it whatsoever, because it was what I knew, and so I was always bumping into people trying to figure out from them what I could learn from them. And I had a saying for a long, long time: accept the good, forget the bad in people. And then I would say, I got to a certain phase later where I would just say, I don't need to hang out with this mix of good and bad. I can seek out relationships that are ones that will be consistent and reinforcing.
So if you have a group of 5 friends, you want to raise the average bar of value in that with everyone included in it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where no one's bringing down the group.
Yeah, it's like, so that's when you leave the bar. You know, you sort of leave the bar. You leave those. You know, eventually, what you sort of say, I have so much time, I want to use it well, and you sort of leave behind the time wasting things or the sort of things that are not interesting to you.
The habit building on that lonely road for me was one that the compound effect of it was huge. The day-to-day direct hit was not very big, but instead of going to Applebee's for a happy hour with the guys, I'd go walk on a treadmill at night after having already worked 12 hours, and then go walk on a treadmill for an hour, listen to a book. Whatever it was, I knew things that I was doing at the current time were not going to get me better, but I knew things that I could do to get better.
Yeah.
I didn't know how big they were yet.
Yeah, at a certain point in time, the person that grew up in your experience and mine, you recognize you're always the result of the cumulative habits that you've had previously. So you're always seeking out better habits and improvements so that your cumulative future self will be better than it is now.
It's been such a non-negotiable for me with foundational habits in my life.
Yeah, working out. Right.
Primal,
that was the big game changer for you, was it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that
Oh, absolutely.
working
Because
out changed everything?
well, it changed my physical appearance, which was the part of the reason that drove me there. Me hating who I was at a 15-year-old time frame.
Did you really hate who you were?
I did, because
Really?
I felt like I was lazy. I got made fun of for being fat. I got my ass kicked when I was in like elementary school for up until probably like freshman year, where it was something that set me back. Yeah.
I don't know that did you ever have the experience of hating yourself, Steve? Yeah, I didn't have it either. So that would be a high motivator.
Maybe for 15 minutes at a time, but not a.
Yeah, but I mean,
like that.
yeah, no.
That's
I would say
We're all
time
different.
I felt confused and bewildered and uncertain, but I don't know that. So that would be a high motivator.
This episode is brought to you by Max Effort Muscle. For all your supplement needs, go to maxeffortmuscle.com.